Hi everyone! For my final paper, I chose to research and learn more about the effects of climate change in Alaska and the impacts of these changes on Native Alaskans and their communities. I hope you guys all enjoy our presentation. So the reason that I chose this topic is that Alaska is warming at an alarming rate, and the impact of climate change is affecting the land, sea ice, weather patterns, and subsistence living activities such as hunting, gathering, and harvesting materials. The effects of climate change are also impacting the availability of clean, fresh water sources, and it's directly impacting the health and well-being of Native Alaskans who depend on the land in Alaska and its resources for day-to-day survival. Alaska is the only U.S. state that still has vast areas of permafrost below its surface. Permafrost is a permanent frozen ground that helps hold the land in Alaska together. With the warming global temperatures, which are warming particularly quickly in Alaska, the permafrost has begun to soften and melt, and once permafrost begins to soften, it will continue to thaw and soften over time. As the permafrost softens, structures such as roads, foundations for a building, food storage cellars, and plumbing can become unstable and begin to shift and break apart, resulting in large amounts of funding previously allocated for things like education having to be reassigned in order to fix the damaged infrastructure. In addition, softened permafrost is also more prone to erosion, resulting in a more widespread damage to land and infrastructure when things like flooding or storms occur in the area. Permafrost also serves like a sealant to contain water in ponds and lakes, as it softens, the water in the ponds and the lakes is free to drain out through the soil. In fact, over the last 50 years, over 50% of the lakes and ponds in Alaska have disappeared. As lakes and ponds continuously drain, waterfowl is forced to relocate, limiting food sources for the natives who depend on hunting for their survival. In addition to the melting and thawing of permafrost, Alaska is also facing a decline in sea ice. Thinning sea ice due to warming temperatures results in shorter ice fishing seasons and a loss of access to hunting grounds for valuable resources such as seals. The thinning of sea ice also results in dangerous conditions for travel and often results in the loss of machinery, injury to those attempting to travel on the ice, or even death. Migration patterns of valuable native animals have also changed as many of these species require ice for their survival. Sea ice also serves as a protective barrier to help keep coastal lands safe from waves and violent storms. A lack of sea ice contributes to further erosion of already eroding coastlines. It has also been documented that storms approaching from the west are now able to pick up more energy and build into stronger storms as they are now moving over open water rather than packed ice fields. More violent and more powerful storms can cause further damage to an already delicate coastline. Historically, the ancestors of the current residents of Alaska Native communities migrated seasonally along coastal and inland hunting and fishing camps in order to follow wild game and fish on which they depended for survival. However, natives have since been required to reside in permanent settlements and are no longer allowed to migrate seasonally as they have permanent community and school sites designated by the federal government. Because they are bound to permanent settlements, natives are no longer able to follow animals along migration patterns in order to hunt. In addition, many traditional food sources have been affected by the melting sea ice. For example, seals depend on sea ice to raise healthy young, and polar bears depend on healthy populations of seals to feed on for their survival. As sea mammal populations decline, limiting valuable food resources for the natives, the government is continuously placing further restriction on the abilities of natives to hunt and limits on the number of animals available for harvest each year as an attempt to preserve some of the endangered species. Hunts by sea have also become more difficult and more dangerous as many whale populations have moved further out to sea. More equipment is required to harvest and process sea animals as they are further out to sea, the waters are rougher, and natives are forced to purchase more expensive and larger motors and boats to be able to facilitate a safe hunt. It has also been more difficult to harvest the meat from whales once they are hauled onto land as the ice is thinner and thaws more quickly underneath the animal being processed. Forest lands are expanding north at an alarming rate. For every 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit the average temperature increases over time, forests are expanding north by about 62 miles. Additionally, scientists predict that over the next 100 years, the Seward Peninsula will transform from a predominantly tundra ecosystem to a deciduous forest, and as a result, important subsistence species like caribou may move on from the area or disappear completely. However, all of these changes are not necessarily bad. On the bright side, increasing temperatures could result in an increase of about 20% in growing seasons for plants, allowing for a longer season to engage in subsistence activities like gathering fruit, vegetables, and other valuable plant-based resources. In addition to engaging in subsistence activities such as harvesting plant and animal materials, natives must also access clean water sources for survival. Native and rural Alaskans depend on various water sources such as groundwater, lakes and reservoirs, and rivers and creeks for their day-to-day survival. As mentioned previously, the infrastructure that transports the water can become damaged, unstable, or destroyed as a result of the melting permafrost, which can result in water shortages or an interruption in services that could last several months. In addition, due to warmer temperatures, algae blooms are increasing across the state of Alaska in rivers and lakes. Additional cleansing and purification of water cost communities additional funding and time to ensure the safety of their residents. As mentioned previously, warming water temperatures and changes in vegetation can also result in changing migration patterns and ecosystems. One such change in ecosystems is that beavers are now residing within the waterways in Alaska. Beavers serve as hosts for various waterborne diseases such as Giardia, which also serve as an additional risk for residents consuming water and an additional monetary expense to ensure the water is disease-free and safe to consume. Lakes and water sources are also draining completely due to melting permafrost, resulting in a lack of water sources in some areas. Flooding driven by erosion due to melting permafrost can also result in water contamination, requiring residents to boil their water prior to consumption, and an increased risk in waterborne disease-related illnesses. Each of the factors previously discussed also plays an important role on the overall health of those who are affected. While some of the effects of climate change have positively affected the health of natives experiencing them in ways such as the emergence of new resources or food sources and longer seasons, natives have also been significantly impacted in negative ways due to the changing climate in Alaska. Natives in communities impacted by the effects of climate change report health issues including food insecurities from thawing traditional underground food cellars, reduction in source water quality due to warming and algae blooms, and an increased risk of injury from traveling on thin sea ice. As a result, natives are having to incur additional monetary costs to mitigate the health risks and monitor the safety of their food and water resources. As Alaska continues to be faced with the challenges of battling the effects of climate change, those communities directly affected by the negative effects of climate change are searching for and asking for solutions. The yearly cost to repair the damages caused by the effects of climate change in Alaska could be as high as $35 million per year, or approximately 1.4% of the state's budget. Larson et al. Estimate that from the years 2008 to 2030, Alaska could spend approximately $1 billion to repair the damage done as a result of climate change. While most communities are taking action steps to repair damages and to try to prepare and mitigate for the damages due to the effects of climate change, others are facing the financial burden that comes with being forced to relocate their communities, as relocation appears to be the only option for their communities. While the government has spent millions of dollars creating protective barriers to help mitigate the damage done by flooding and other effects of climate change, these protective barriers have a lifespan of less than 10 years, so relocation will likely be inevitable for the communities affected. However, no government organization exists that can relocate a community or plan for the relocation of a community, and no funding has been allocated or designated specifically for community relocation. As a result of the lack of funding and government support, none of the 12 communities that have been identified as needing to relocate have been able to do so. Relocation is dire for some communities, and the process is not going well. For example, Kivalina and Shishmaref are two communities identified as needing to relocate as soon as possible. Both of these communities selected and agreed upon relocation sites, only to have the government deem these sites unfit for relocation due to permafrost beneath the surface. Another example is the community of Newtok. Newtok is the only community of the 12 selected for relocation that has successfully chosen a relocation site and has begun the process of relocating. Construction of infrastructure has started at the relocation site. However, the process has been slow and extremely difficult as the community continues to face challenges working with the government organizations to coordinate and fund the relocation. The need for a solution to mitigate, prevent, and even reverse the effects of climate change in Alaska is evident. However, it seems that solutions to do so are daunting and remain distant hopes and dreams. Over the last 50 years, Alaska has warmed at a rate of twice as fast as the global average, and the temperatures are expected to continue to rise over time. As a result, many Native communities are facing the challenges that have come along with a warming Alaska. As the climate continues to change, Alaska will continually be impacted by these changes at an above average rate. The United States needs to begin planning and taking action steps to ensure the survival of its state, its lands, resources, and its people as climate change is having a dramatic impact on the Arctic environment, changing weather, the landscape, flora and fauna, and the lives and health of the Arctic peoples.